man, you can't bend. Y'all be playing it safe and I be going for the win. Remember back when they was doubting on the kid. Now they tuned in cause my game too legit.
Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that Chubb life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what up, everybody? What up? Glad everybody is doing well out there on this Monday. This is my second shot at doing this show today. So if you were watching earlier, I know I don't have to apologize, but I'm going to say my apologies anyway because I'm from the Midwest, and that's how we start sentences in the Midwest. So my apologies for earlier. I went live to do this show at like 1 o'clock or whatever it was this afternoon. Maybe 2. I don't remember what it was. While I was in the middle of the show, I got a call from the school. My daughter had quote unquote medical emergency. I had to go handle that. She is okay. She is resting. There's things that we're monitoring with her right now. It is not life-threatening. It is not severe in any way, shape, or form. More scary than anything. So I appreciate all the messages that we got. Appreciate everyone letting me know, hey, thinking about you. Hope your daughter's doing well. She's doing great right now. So again, appreciate all those messages for everyone. And I appreciate everyone being okay with me saying, oh crap, I've got to go, and ending the stream. So yeah, we'll continue to monitor things here over the next couple of days. Already in contact with her doctor, and we're going from there. So we're good to go for right now. So appreciate everybody again. But we got to hop into it. We're going to kind of roll through this a little bit. I wanted to make sure that we still got this show out of the way and taken care of. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to roll fast tonight. I'm not even really going to be looking at the chat, to be honest with you. I'm going to be reading through the things that we normally go through. We're going to go through each game from this past week. Just some different points and things from each game and why or why not things may have happened. Do we need to be worried about them? Stuff like that. Go through some hits or misses at the end, and then we'll probably call it there. Again, it's 6 o'clock at night. I've got, again, kids to take care of. COVID is still going through my house right now, and we are dealing with just the typical Monday night madness. So, and we've got Monday Night Football tonight. So let's go ahead and hop into it and let's get going. Let's see here real quick. So where did we leave off? So I went through like the first 3 games earlier. Let's just hop back real quick, and we'll just go through them again real fast. Green Bay versus Detroit for Green Bay. Jayden Reed for me right now is the guy that's the most consistent player on this team in terms of skill position. 41 snaps this past week was fourth really behind Tucker Kraft, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs in that order. But they're moving Jayden Reed all over the place. They're putting him in the slot. lot. He's coming off the field in 2 wide receiver sets, but he is going into the backfield every once in a while as well. But he is a guy that's doing good things right now, good consistent things right now. And I believe that they're just really trying to put him in a position to succeed. And that's what I want out of my wide receivers. Jordan Love is playing great right now. So let's just hope that he continues to play that way. As far as the Detroit Lions go, I know a lot of people are disappointed, unfortunately, in Jahmyr Gibbs and his performance this week. No targets for David Montgomery. He only ran 7 routes compared to Jahmyr Gibbs' 42 routes. Technically, the game plan worked out very well for Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of his usage in the passing game, but Jared Goff just a little bit off again. Obviously, the turnovers hurt them. It didn't allow them to establish the run as nice as they would have liked to. They couldn't work off the play action a little bit more. So there were some things that kind of kept their value down this week. But Gibbs and Montgomery are still top 12 backs the rest of the season at this point. New Orleans is going to be a tougher matchup. So David Montgomery has a little bit of a lower ceiling for me this coming week, and we'll talk about those in those shows coming up. Jahmyr Gibbs, though, should once again see some decent work in the passing game. Tucker Kraft played 88 or ran a route on 88% of their snaps. You'll hear about that in the waiver wire show if you haven't caught it already. That is live already. Dallas at Washington. Brandon Cooks playing very well right now. Still very up and down for me, unfortunately. I think there's going to be a lot of touchdown dependency, but with the way Dallas is playing right now, Dallas is a scary team right now. They really, really are. But will they still be scary in January when the calendar switches over and now we're in the playoffs? That's going to be one of the major questions there for the Dallas Cowboys, is how long can they keep this going? But the defense is spectacular, obviously, and then the offense is running on all cylinders. You don't want to be putting it all out right now, though. We'll see what ends up happening the rest of the way. If Dallas were to win the wild card and Philly wins the first round bye with the NL East title, Dallas is not a team that I would want my Lions facing in the first round. I would absolutely hate that. So hopefully it doesn't work out that way. For the Washington Commanders, another probably questions about Rico Dowdle as well. Only played 12 snaps compared to Tony Pollard's 41. He is included in the waiver wire show this week. But Tony Pollard was out there essentially the entire time in a game that really felt like it was over at halftime anyway. So interesting to see Dowdle didn't get more touches this past week. Jake Ferguson, also targets continue to be a concern for me. Let me rephrase that. Consistent targets continue to be a concern for me. Only 3 this past week. That was as much as Jalen Tolbert had. In fact, 8 to CeeDee Lamb, 6 to Tony Pollard, 5 to Brandon Cooks. Ferguson and Jalen Tolbert were tied with 3. Luke Schoonmaker had 2, so he only had 1 less target than what Jake Ferguson did. That was probably when he came out of the game, too. Ferguson had to come off the field a couple of times with a bloody nose there. I think it was him. Somebody had like a bloody nose, and I think they had to come out and then come back on. Maybe that was him. I can't remember for sure. I was halfway asleep during that game for a majority of the time. The turkey had already kicked in, and that game was boring. So, but for Jake Ferguson, we need to get him rolling a little bit better. 3 targets a week isn't going to cut it. That's going to put him outside top 12 status. We need to get him up towards 6-7 targets a week, which keeps him in the top 5 for me. Washington Commanders, keep an eye on Curtis Samuel over the next couple of weeks. He had a great week this week, 9 receptions, 100 yards. He had 12 targets, which led the team. McLaurin had 11, then Jahan Dotson had 6, but Curtis Samuel played far less snaps. He played 23 less snaps than Dotson and McLaurin, so he was not on the field nearly as much as those guys. He was on the field barely more than Antonio Gibson, who had 36 snaps as well. So Washington right now, they're up and down. It feels like the offense plays really well one game and really poorly the next game. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, kind of a product of that, right? We never really know when to start any of those guys. Keep an eye on Curtis Samuel down the stretch, though. Would really like to see him get a little bit more involved, but wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't more consistently as they work on a relationship with Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. San Francisco at Seattle. Christian McCaffrey obviously had a great game. A lot of the things that we're seeing right now with this team are things that we've talked about consistently. It's going to be hard. Outside of Christian McCaffrey, it's really going to be hard to plan on consistency from any single player any given week. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey as the number one, and then the number two, A, B, and C will be Ayuk, will be Kittle, and will be Deebo Samuel. Now, the good thing for Deebo Samuel, I will say at this point, he's probably safer than Kittle and Ayuk because he is getting some work out of the backfield as well. But George Kittle ran 66 snaps and 27 routes. That was 16 more snaps than Deebo Samuel, and it was the same exact number of routes run as well. So just keep an eye kind of on the usage coming up over the next couple of weeks here. Obviously, when you talk about Deebo Samuel, very, very good in terms of zone coverage. You let him get loose in zone coverage, and he's going to make people miss and stuff. Why consistently he's been one of the best players after the catch his entire career, and really same for George Kittle. But I mean, when you start Brandon Ayuk, it's going to be a little boomer bust. When you start Deebo Samuel, it's going to be a pretty decent floor, but it's not going to be the highest ceiling because he's not making like the big plays right now. George Kittle, he's going to have a really high ceiling every single week, but he's going to go down to the low floor because when you take a look at what he doesn't get as much targets as a lot of the other tight ends, but he does more with less. But if he doesn't do more with less in any given week, you're not going to get a whole lot. He's not volume. He's big play guy. So as far as Seattle goes, Jackson Smith-Njigba only ran 2 less routes than DK Metcalf and nearly played identical snaps as him as well. 6 less targets, though. Jackson Smith-Njigba will be in the waiver wire video if you haven't checked it out yet. He is a guy who is consistently looking better week after week after week after he injured his hand to begin the season. Would not be surprised if DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett are gone at the end of the season and JSN is the number 2 next year. Kenneth Walker was inactive with the oblique injury. A lot of people were excited for Zach Charbonnet. If you were one of those people and I rained on your parade all week, I really apologize. I didn't mean to, but I kind of foreshadowed what was going to happen with Charbonnet, right? It was going to be a difficult game for him to break big plays and be a consistent contributing factor in all of this, and that's exactly what ended up happening here. He was on the field the entire time, though, which is good. But for Kenneth Walker, if and when he comes back, because right now I don't think he'll be back this week. They play on Thursday Night Football. I suspect that he will be back probably next week in Week 14. And because of that, we probably see a little bit more of a split workload as Seattle tries to keep him healthy for a playoff push. Now, Seattle's fading a little bit right now, but consistently Kenneth Walker has been a guy who they know what they're going to get from him every week. He's a much more physical and punishing runner than what Zach Charbonnet is. Zach Charbonnet's got a little bit more finesse to him. Kenneth Walker's got some finesse, but he's also a little bit better at running right through you, making people miss, running through those tackles. So just keep in mind that as we move through him returning, if you're a Kenneth Walker owner, I'm not off Kenneth Walker, but his ceiling is going to greatly decrease because it would not surprise me if they try to give Zach Charbonnet more work. Now, the good thing about Zach Charbonnet, if you're a Kenneth Walker owner, he hasn't done anything with that work. So he hasn't like stolen his job or anything like that. And his matchup this week against Dallas on Thursday night is not good. All right, so that's the Thursday games. Let's go to Friday now. Miami and the New York Jets. Tyreek Hill, another good game. Jaylen Waddle, a good game as well. I've been getting questions about Jaylen Waddle. Do I use this as a chance to sell high on him? I'm not. Does he have the ceiling that he had last year? No, and part of that has been he's been banged up this year. So, unfortunately, he's been dealing with some injuries. But, I mean, he played 2 more snaps than Tyreek Hill. He ran the same amount of routes as Tyreek Hill, and he only had a few less targets. So, he's clearly the number 2 on that offense, but there's so much attention given to Tyreek Hill that it makes Jaylen Waddle the potential to disappear some weeks, but other weeks it's like he's got such an easy path to big numbers. Maybe he doesn't see the volume that we saw a couple of years ago when he was a rookie and Tyreek Hill wasn't there, but I'm okay with that. He's going to be a guy that is like a solid number 2 for you, where there might be some weeks that you're a little disappointed with the matchup and how he did things. But for a majority of his games the rest of the season, as long as he stays healthy and this offense stays healthy, he should be just fine. I know a lot of people were asking about Jeff Wilson Jr. There was some concern that he lost, or Raheem Mostert lost a ton of touches to him. I mean, not really. Mostert played 42 snaps. Wilson only played 23, so he played 19 less snaps than what Mostert did. Mostert ran more routes. He ran 6 more routes. He did have 2 less targets, but he had 9 more carries. Just trying to keep things balanced with Mostert. Mostert's 32 years old, and he is a guy that is not held up over the course of many seasons. We're getting into the grindy part of the year now, and because of that, they're going to want to keep him healthy, especially with Devin Etienne continuously banged up. Couldn't make it back this week. I would be willing to bet that it's probably another week before Etienne comes back, and even if he does come back this week, I don't know if I'm going to be as exuberant about wanting to play him as I was last week. So for Raheem Mostert, it's okay that he's losing touches. Don't worry about it. He still has the same upside. Look at the splits here. He still scored 2 touchdowns and had a really big day for you. So don't really worry about that if I were you. For the New York Jets, I mean, Garrett Wilson had a pretty decent day, which was good. We'll see how the quarterback situation continues to play out there. Jason Brownlee led the team with 57 snaps this past week. He also tied with 45 routes run with Garrett Wilson. So interesting to see Jason Brownlee coming out of nowhere to be near the top of those peaks there. I mean, Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert are splitting snaps right now, almost identical in a lot of numbers this past week. So Tyler Conklin looked like he might be picking up some fantasy value, and it kind of disappeared on us. So really, when you take a look at New York, I think the biggest thing here is what we've seen with Bree Hall in his unfortunate downward spiral in terms of efficiency. But that's just what happens when you have such a poor offense, right? You have all the weapons around him, but you have quarterbacks that don't give those weapons consistent upside. So defenses are waiting on Bree Hall. And Bree Hall, if you've got 8, 9 defenders in the box at a time, you're super explosive. But if you don't stay more balanced and keep defenses on their toes, you're really still going to have a tough time no matter how explosive you are, no matter how good of a running back you are. And I know Robert Saleh made the comments about he needs to be able to pick up more gritty yards and stuff like that. I like Robert Saleh as a head coach. I do think he is a good head coach. But I also think that he should have just kept his mouth shut there. I think he's doing too much. And taking a shot at Bree Hall, really the only weapon in your offense that does anything right outside of Garrett Wilson, just doesn't seem like the right path to getting your offense going anyway. If I were Robert Saleh, I would stay off of Bree Hall and just let the guy work. Also, let's do some things a little bit differently with him. Let's get him in open space. Let's do some outside zones. Let's stop running him in the back of his crappy offensive line. Let's try to put a fullback with there and get a lead block. Let's play 2 tight ends and try to get extra blockers out there. Let's just try to do something a little bit more with him. If you get a little bit more creative, I really think Bree Hall could be better for you. Some of the explosiveness come and go. I mean, that's just what happens when you have a serious knee injury like he did. Next year, though, I definitely think that, especially if Aaron Rodgers comes back, which he should. I don't have any inclination that he's going to retire after this year. I mean, no way he's going out after this. So he should be back next year with New York, as long as he stays healthy and the offensive line gets a little bit of a boost. Bree Hall, really, if you wanted to make an argument for him being one of the top overall draft picks next year in fantasy, I am absolutely okay with that. Absolutely okay with that. Let's go. Okay, so that's really the early games for the week. Let's go into the rest of the games now. New Orleans and Atlanta Falcons here. Drake London had a decent day. Bijan, Chris Olave had a huge game. the backfield for Atlanta continues to be a question mark. Cordero Patterson ran the ball 8 times for 43 yards. So when you take a look at the running backs right now for Atlanta, 39 snaps for Bijan, 18 for Algier, 16 for Cordero Patterson. And then in terms of carries, it was 16, 10, and 8. It was at the beginning of the game, it felt like they were trying to get Bijan going, but it just didn't happen. And it's New Orleans. So really for me, if I'm game planning for the New Orleans Saints and I've got a player like Bijan Robinson and I've got a quarterback like Desmond Ridder that has struggled, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put Cordero Patterson and Bijan Robinson, or Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson in the backfield together and make defenses try to figure out what's going on and get Bijan Robinson out into some open space. And also do some option things like fake the handoff to Tyler Algier, get Desmond Ridder to the outside with Bijan, let him make a call, pitch it to Bijan, and then at that point, you've got the defense going one way with Algier, you've got a defender trying to decide are we going with Bijan or Desmond Ridder. You're going to put Bijan Robinson in some one-on-one matchups, and we all know he's going to win those 90% of the time. It's just one of those things. It's like I'm a guy sitting here on YouTube talking about football, and I feel like I know more about trying to be creative with an offense than Arthur Smith. If you're watching right now and you think I should coach the Atlanta Falcons, just hit the thumbs up, react, let me know in the comments, because honestly, game planning at the NFL level is incredibly difficult, but it's not difficult to try and be creative. And I use the word try there because just try it. If it doesn't work out, then that's fine. Do something, though, because what you're doing is not working. And the fact is that Atlanta may end up winning the NFC South, and just because of that, it's going to save Arthur Smith's job, and he doesn't deserve to have his job. For the New Orleans Saints, we need to keep an eye on this week for Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. Chris Olave was banged up. Shaheed was banged up. A.T. Perry played 53 snaps, the most of anybody on the team this past week outside of Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson could end up being a big-time play down the stretch for us, for those of you that need a tight end. It really is going to depend on what happens, though. So A.T. Perry, he has seen a little bit more of an increase in playing time. Rashid Shaheed has saw an increase in targets, but not playing time. So Shaheed is really only playing in 3 wide receiver sets. A.T. is playing more along the lines of all wide receiver sets. Just looking through here, making sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, Jonnu Smith also is like gone at this point. I have no idea what happened. Clearly he said something about Arthur Smith that Arthur Smith did not like, because the dude is just gone. Because this past week, Kyle Pitts played 31 snaps. Parker Hess played 23, Jonnu Smith played 22, and Michael Pruitt played 16. 16 route run for Pitts, 3 for Hess, 9 for Smith, 1 for Pruitt. No targets to anyone outside of Kyle Pitts, which makes absolutely no sense. Because Jonnu Smith was one of your most productive players at the beginning of the season. He was very consistent in terms of targets, showed some big playability. Him and Desmond Ridder showed a little bit of a connection, and now you've basically scrapped it and said, this is just another case. This is just another case of Arthur Smith trying to do too much. He's trying to do too much. He's trying to get too fancy. He's trying to rotate players and be like, oh, you weren't expecting me to play Michael Pruitt for 3 snaps this week. Why? Why does Michael Pruitt need to be on the field? What has he done? What does he do better than Jonnu Smith? Just play your best players. Play your best players. But that's what we've gotten from Atlanta all season long, so it does not shock me either. Let's move on. Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. Oh man, Pat Freiermuth. So, I mean, if you've watched this show for a couple of years now, you know that I love the Muth, right? And Kenny Pickett and him are two peas in a pod. They go together very well. Pickett looks to Muth quite often and uses him as really that safety blanket. Comes back from the IR, and I've been telling everyone for 2 weeks now to pick him up. He was on last week's waiver wire. If you didn't get him last week, though, you're probably screwed because you're not getting him this week. We played him when he came back off the IR, but it was only one target. Didn't look like there was much there, and I told everybody then at that point, I was like, we'll definitely want to grab him and potentially hold him, even if we don't play him this week. So I didn't really have him as a start or anything. Didn't really have him ranked. Was not expecting the big output that he had here, but I'm not shocked either. So that was definitely one that I missed on this week in terms of Pat Freiermuth. But this is really good evidence for us moving forward that if we own him, we might be able to rely on him the rest of the way. So good for him. George Pickens, more routes run. More snaps than DJ, one less route run than Deontay Johnson, 2 less targets, more receiving yards. Cincinnati, Ja'Marr Chase did not have that bad of a day, so good for him. Tanner Hudson, unfortunately, took a huge hit in terms of what he's been doing. Target-wise, still led the tight ends, but they had Drew Sample, Irv Smith Jr., Tanner Hudson, and Mitchell Wilcox all running routes. Keep an eye on Tanner Hudson. I do think he could become best friends with Jake Browning, but I also am not. With 4 tight ends playing, it's probably not going to be worth it. So it's just one of those things where we will keep an eye on it. We will keep an eye on it. Let me just roll through here real quick, verifying I didn't miss anything. Jacksonville and Houston, Calvin Ridley, another good game from him. Down the stretch, might see a little bit more of that, which would be good. I think a lot of you out there. Tank Dell, another good game. Nico Collins. I mean, we continue. It's such a weird fight that people want to have over Tank Dell and Nico Collins when they can both coexist and they both should start. Now, I do think that Nico Collins at this point is neck and neck with Tank Dell in terms of consistency, but that's because I believe they both could be inconsistent at any point in time. I don't really think Nico is more consistent than Tank Dell. I really don't think Tank Dell is more consistent than Nico. I think they both have big play potential. I think they both serve a really good purpose in this offense, and I think there might be some weeks where one of them just doesn't hit. Now, right now, it feels like Tank Dell is the play over Nico Collins. And I think ranking him because of that, I don't think there's any problem with saying I'm trusting Tank Dell a little bit more than Nico Collins right now. I mean, if that's one thing, but Nico Collins hasn't really disappeared. And I don't think that we should be arguing Tank Dell or Nico Collins. We should be arguing those guys against like other teams because CJ Stroud has been fantastic. Houston throws the ball a ton and their defense has played a lot better this year than it did last year, but it's still prone to giving up big plays and giving up yards, especially through the air. So don't be surprised if Houston continues to find themselves in game script where they're going to have to throw the football. So for me, when I take a look at the matchups, if it's a really good matchup, then Tank Dell and Nico Collins are both smash starts for me. If it's a more tough matchup, there is a probability that maybe Tank Dell is a little bit safer than what Nico Collins is. But I don't think we need to argue the two anymore. They both deserve to be in our fantasy lineups, and they both have been playing very, very well. Nathan, I feel like you asked that question too, and didn't we say sit Puka and play both of those wide receivers together? For some reason, I felt like maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was someone else, but I thought somebody asked us a question about Tank Dell and Nico, and I was like, we'll just play them both. Like, we can do that. So, could, should, and would are a whole lot of different questions. Could, should, and would is if and buts and candies and nuts, right? We can say he should or if he could, but it's just not happening right now. Devin Singletary taking a pretty big hit with Dameon Pierce back. Now, part of it was Tough run defense. Devin Singletary is still the guy, but Devin Singletary is being utilized a little bit more in a pass-catching role, I feel like, this past week. I mean, snap-wise, Singletary was not even close. He had 49 to Pierce's 11, but he had 6 carries to Pierce's 5. So I think we're going to see Devin Singletary a little bit more often still, and I think we're going to see him more in passing situations and actually with the targets. He had 7 to Pierce's 1. He also ran 35 routes to Dameon Pierce's 6. I'm not worried about starting Dameon Pierce. Devin Singletary probably is still a guy that we can start, but not 100% sold on him having the ceiling that we saw a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, 6 receptions for 54 yards for Singletary. Dalton Schultz was banged up. He was not on the injury report, but he didn't play any snaps within like 9 minutes of the last quarter or something like that. So, or maybe it was like 10 minutes. Almost like the entire fourth quarter, he didn't play at all, I think. So just keep on that. Keep an eye on that for the rest of the week. Noah Brown was out again, obviously. Robert Woods played, but he wasn't really utilized, which is it's fine. We weren't looking to start Robert Woods anyway. Travis Etienne is definitely something to keep an eye on. He ended up going to the locker room at one point. He came back out. He had 20 plus touches, was not super efficient. On the ground, they are definitely having some issues blocking on the ground right now. But Etienne's big playability has kind of overshadowed that. But in this instance, this game, it did not. Like, he wasn't able to get away from the front line of the Texans defense, which as of right now does have a little bit more upside than the rest of their defense. So just keep an eye on that as we go over the next few weeks here. He's still starting though, and you're not trading him or anything like that. It was a few bad games. Doug Peterson has said that they have made a conscious effort to make sure that they don't overwork him though. So don't be surprised that if he's a little banged up, if they don't try to take it easy on him, and if he's ineffective right now, it might be a little bit due to the fact that he is banged up. So, but we'll keep starting him because there's nobody in football at this point, for the most part, that's getting more touches than what Travis Etienne is. Indianapolis and Tampa Bay, Michael Pittman continues to be a guy. He continues to be a guy. No, Charlie, I talk about the backup today. It's not Tank Bigsby. Dearness Johnson is the backup to Travis Etienne. Michael Pittman just continues to be a dude. 13 targets, probably the most productive day for a lot of wide receivers this past week. Michael Pittman's a guy that there really shouldn't be any questions about starting him. We're playing Michael Pittman. Josh Downs didn't have a great day production-wise, but saw 12 targets, so don't forget about that. Mike Evans continues to be a guy. I mean, Mike Evans and Michael Pittman, for me, are guys that are having good years, but they're not having good enough years that people are like, yep, Pittman and Evans, but they should be in your lineup every single week at this point. So both of those guys should be running. One thing to keep an eye on is that Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss did kind of go back and forth a little bit more for Indy this week. Taylor saw 42 snaps to Zach Moss's 30. So JT is still clearly the lead back, but he saw 21 routes run to 17 for Zach Moss. Zach Moss saw 3 targets to Jonathan Taylor's 0. He's still the guy, but just keep an eye on that because it looked like last week that we were done with Zach Moss. But moving forward, maybe he is playing a little bit more, and if he is, he's not necessarily the option of just getting rid of like we had once talked about. He is a guy that you desperately still need to own as a JT owner to make sure if anything happens to JT, you've got his backup. So The big thing about Jonathan Taylor, he had a really, really good week because he scored a couple of touchdowns, but the overall production really was for a majority of the game. It took a couple of big runs and then obviously those TDs to put him where he was at. But if Moss is seeing more touches, Taylor probably isn't a top 5 running back. Tampa Bay, Rachaad White. I try to give him a little bit of extra love this week because I know you all think that I hate him. Ran for 100 yards. Good for him. Good for... Let's, everybody, for Rachaad White real quick. Okay. You need to do it more consistent, though. Come on, Rachaad. Let's go. Come on. Come on. I don't... He might. He might down the stretch. He might down the stretch. New York Giants, keep an eye on Jaylen Hyatt. The big thing here, and I mentioned it in the waiver wire video, Darius Slayton saw some big plays a couple weeks ago, and then Jaylen Hyatt saw some big plays this past week. Tommy DeVito isn't afraid to push the ball down the field. He's okay with it. He's taking shots right now. The dude, listen, the dude's living at home with his mom. He's a professional starting NFL quarterback. The dude's like, I'm living this while I can live it, right? He's got no fear, and I love that. I love the fact that he's going out there and slinging right now. He just doesn't give an F. He's like, I've got my chance. I may never get it again. I am taking full advantage of it. Good for Tommy DeVito. But it could make some of these wide receivers a little bit easier to stash on our bench down the stretch right now, okay? So just keep an eye on it. Just keep an eye on it. Saquon wasn't that good this week. Kind of saw that coming. Ramondre continues to work his way back. Baby, if you listen, I know that there was a lot of concerns about Ramondre Stevenson at the beginning of the season. And even though I never jumped off board, I was really, really close. Because I even told you guys, if he has a big game and you can get a decent trade offer for him, you might as well. And it had nothing to do with Ramondre. It had everything to do with the way he was being utilized. But over the last few weeks, that has changed. And they're starting to get him the ball a little bit more and get him going. Everything like that, okay? So for me, when you look at the way Ramondre Stevenson is being utilized right now, he's kind of back to being a must-start for me every single week. His playing time continues to increase. He's seeing more and more touches, more and more snaps than what Zeke is. 53 snaps to only 15 this past week. 25 routes run to only 5. 5 targets to 2. 21 carries to only 9. And really, Elliott is coming in kind of short stints. So if you see Zeke Elliott coming in to start a drive, he's only out there for like an average of 3 to 4 plays. So if it is a longer drive that extends for New England, Ramondre gets back in there when it's go time, when they're crossing midfield or they're getting closer to the red zone territory, which means he's also playing the snaps that matter the most, which is what we want to see, even if they're games where maybe he's game scripted out a little bit more, that we can put him in a situation to still score. Stevenson also seeing a lot of the 2-minute drills right now. So Stevenson is getting the work. And quite honestly, the rest of the way, not only is Ramondre Stevenson going to be a fantasy asset for you down the road, there's always some potential that he could be a league-winning running back here the rest of the season. So if you held on to him, this is what we were waiting for. It took a while. It took a lot of Pepto-Bismol, a lot of blood pressure medication to get through the beginning of the season with him. But we're here. If you've held on to him, this is why you held on to him. He's a must-start going forward for all of us. We do have to keep an eye on Demario Douglas. He got smoked in the fourth quarter, and he didn't come back. But he's not technically in the concussion protocol. Like, unless something has changed over the last few hours, as of this morning, he was not officially in the concussion protocol and did not have a designation. Now, that may have changed. Obviously, as you heard at the beginning of the show, my day was a little busy today. So if I missed it, my apologies. We're still keeping an eye on him, though. Even if he doesn't clear this week, I'm adding him in all half PPR and full PPR formats. And if you want to know why, check the waiver wire video after this show. You'll hear exactly why he needs to be added up. Carolina at Tennessee. Carolina's going to look different next week. Obviously, Frank Reich being fired today. And really my opinion on Frank Reich being fired is the fact that this is the second straight time that a front office has let him down. He was let down in Indianapolis by not getting the offensive line needed to protect their career quarterback, Andrew Luck. He was let down in Indianapolis because he was a guy that he was let down because they didn't have the offensive line, that they tried to go through all of these quarterbacks and reuse them, whether it was Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan or Phillip Rivers, and they never got a quarterback of the future again. And now he goes into this situation in Carolina where there was this talk that there was this split on whether or not they draft Bryce Young, and some people wanted him and some people didn't, and things of that nature. So for me, when I take a look at Frank Reich's tenure in the NFL, I think he keeps getting screwed by his front office, and then he gets blamed for it and gets canned. I think Frank Reich is a good NFL head coach. I just don't think that he has had the personnel over the last few years in Indy and this 1 year here in Carolina. Nobody's coming into this Carolina situation and making them winners. It's just not going to happen. They don't have the offensive line. They traded their best offensive weapon. Adam Thielen's been okay, but he can't do it by himself. Hayden Hurst hasn't done anything. Terrence Marshall hasn't done anything. Jonathan Mingo hasn't done anything. Miles Sanders hasn't done anything. Chuba Hubbard hasn't done anything. It's just a mess all the way around. It's a mess all the way around. So that's my Frank Reich spiel there. Tennessee, Derrick Henry led the team in snaps out of the backfield. I know people get worried about Tajay Spears, but Derrick Henry was out there. He ran just as many routes as Spears this week, and he had 18 carries to Spears 2, 76 yards on 18 carries, 2 touchdowns, only the 1 reception, but oh well. He got into the end zone twice for us. These are the type of games that we want to see from Derrick Henry. When you're going up against an opponent that gives up a lot of rushing yards, Derrick Henry has a good week, and he continues to do that. He's got a super low ceiling against tough opponents, and he's got a super high floor against the easier opponents. It's just the way it is with him now. For Carolina, kind of talked a little bit about that already. Backfield for me right now, Chuba Hubbard continues to lead it, especially in terms of routes run. He is definitely the passing down running back. He did score that touchdown. I don't trust either him or Miles Sanders right now. I don't know if I'll be playing either of them anytime soon. And it'll be interesting to see what they do from an offensive standpoint. Do I have water left in here? I do. And Terrace Marshall Jr. is a healthy inactive, too. He's a healthy inactive. Los Angeles Rams and Arizona Cardinals. Probably my biggest hit of the week is Kyren Williams. Raise your hand if you played Kyren Williams. I had Kyren Williams ranked 20 spots higher than the consensus, and I also had him ranked higher than anybody else in the industry this week. I love you all. I love you all. That's why I do these things for you. Kyren Williams with a huge week, something I expected coming back. There was questions about his snap count. He saw 41 snaps, ran 21 routes, had 6 targets and 16 carries. Royce Freeman did kind of spell him at the end because at that point there was no reason to keep running Kyren Williams out there while they were beating up on the while they were beating up on the Arizona Cardinals. So when you take a look at what he did, 16 carries, 143 yards, 6 receptions, 61 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. Kyren Williams is the dude, and he's a top 12 running back probably the rest of the season. Keep rolling with it, baby. Keep rolling with it. Sean McVay loves one running back systems. He wants to get the majority of the touches to one guy. And that's Kyren Williams right now. Arizona Cardinals, I mean, honestly, they really fell behind. James Conner didn't have a great game. Michael Carter, though, keep an eye on Michael Carter as the backup in Arizona. If you own James Conner and you have a spot, keep an eye on Michael Conner. Played 27 snaps to Conner's 30, 19 routes run to Conner's 15, 5 targets, the same as Conner, 4 carries to Conner, 6. And again, that was kind of due to the score more than anything, but just keep an eye on Michael Carter as the backup now to James Conner. Yeah, so for Kyren Williams, he only played 50% of the snaps in the second half. They were up 21-8 at that point, and the Rams started putting some backups in. Zach Evans saw some snaps at that point, but Freeman really saw the second half snaps. So don't worry about Royce Freeman's usage this week. It's because the game was out of control. I'm not super worried about Tyler Higbee keeping up this performance. You'll hear about it in the waiver wire show if you watch it. For Denver, I mean, Samaje Perine is definitely the backup again to Javonte Williams. Jaleel McLaughlin only played 2 snaps the entire day, so it's 100% him. Cortland Sutton is the only player outside of Javonte Williams that we're starting right now. 52 snaps, 22 routes, and 6 targets. Judy played 41. Marvin Mims played 32. LaJordan Humphrey played 20. David Sills played 5. Adam Troutman played 61 snaps, but he only saw 1 target. He's not utilized. He's a blocker. He's a blocker. That's all he is, because he played 61 snaps and only ran 17 routes. So they just block with their tight end. They don't utilize him in the passing game. So Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams are the only 2 guys from Denver right now that I'm super concerned about. You know, I'm sorry, but Jerome Ford is just, he's not the guy that Jerome Ford truthers think he is. Oh, you guys are wondering about Cooper Kupp. He's banged up right now. That's really all it is. Give him another week or 2. Let's see how he gets going. I'm not going to play him over some other guys that we've seen perform very well this year, but I'm also not going to sit him if you don't have anything. So he definitely is a bench candidate for right now, but it really depends on who you have. I'm not willing to give up hope, though. He's definitely banged up, and he's feeling it, though. Who was I talking about? What was I getting ready to talk about? Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford is not the guy that truthers think he is. This is another performance against a defense that is playing much better, but he's not being utilized. And even when he is being utilized, it's a lot of up and down performances for him. So really, when you look at Jerome Ford, I think a lot of people right now have Jerome Ford and they go, oh, I've got a guy that's capable of tight end 1 numbers, when really all year long, he has overshadowed his inefficiency with touchdown and big plays. It's kind of the same thing I say with Rachaad White. In all due respect, he's playing very well right now. And again, I'm just being honest with everybody. Rachaad White has over kind of shadowed his efficiencies with work in the passing game and touchdowns. And sometimes that happens, and that's okay. But then when those touchdowns don't come, like Rachaad White this past week, he had a good game on the ground. He ran for 100 yards, but he didn't score a touchdown. So really, he gave you, 12, 13 fantasy points, was it? How many was it? It's kind of the same thing with Jerome Ford. So when you look at them, you look at guys and you say, oh, they've got RB1 upside, but a majority of the time they're gonna need they're going to need a touchdown to get there, or they're going to need 7-8 targets to get there, or they're going to need a big play to get there. And you could say that about a lot of running backs, but there's also running backs that we play and we're like, we know these guys are going to get touches. We know that they're going to play well. We know what we're going to get from them. So those are just things that you want to keep in mind when you kind of go through this process. Yes, the numbers on the top end look good, but the numbers underneath show that there could be a lot of issues if they're not performing or if they're not hitting those big plays. And Jerome Ford, way more than Rachaad White, but still kind of the same instance, fits that bill where he's going to have to be a guy that is going to have to start scoring some touchdowns again. And if he doesn't, he's okay for like a flex option, but he's not really going to reach high-end RB2 status anymore this season. That's really what we're looking at with Jerome Ford. Keep an eye on Amari Cooper's health. He had a rib injury. X-rays are negative. Keep an eye on his health. Javonte Williams continues to dominate the offensive snaps. Jerome Ford, I mean, he played the most snaps this week, a majority more snaps this week than what Kareem Hunt did. But the numbers over the last few weeks have showed that he's playing in passing situations anyway, so we're not shocked by that. Kansas City and Las Vegas, Pacheco, not a great game. 2 touchdowns, though. He's definitely the guy I'm like, I think he's the perfect trade candidate because I think he's a guy that gives you, we're not expecting RB1 numbers from him anymore, but if we put him in as our RB2 or maybe even a flex, if you have him as your RB3 on your team, I'll take the number he's been given every week so far. It's still really tough to play anybody that's not named Travis Kelce for the Kansas City Chiefs, though. Just keep that in mind. Rashee Rice, another good game, 10 targets, but, I mean, we'll have a really good game, and then he'll be in the dumpster the next game. Devontae Adams, they continue to get him working. Jacobi Meyers, though, is not going anywhere. Jacobi Meyers is not going anywhere, which is good. For those of you, me included, that have him in leagues, I have him in one of my best ball leagues, which is doing very well right now. It's one of the best ball mania leagues through Underdog, and I'm winning my division. So I've got like a 300-point lead with 2 weeks left in the regular season. Whew, let's go, baby. We're going to the playoffs. We're bringing home cash money this year. Yeah, he could be a really nice kind of re-addition to the team because a lot of people dropped him or they weren't starting him anymore, but he could be exactly what a lot of people need down the stretch where like, oh my gosh, like Jacobi Meyers getting consistent targets again would be awesome for me. Eagles in Buffalo. I mean, Devontae Smith had the big day, scored a touchdown. A.J. Brown didn't have as good of a day, but scored a touchdown as well. DeAndre Swift, it's really up and down right now with him. He's probably going outside my top 10 this week. The upside is dreadful right now for him, and I think it's one of those things where he's worn down right now, and that's just what it's been for his career. So if you own DeAndre Swift, you probably need to have Kenneth Gainwell on your team. For the Buffalo Bills, I think Gabe Davis balled out, right? Of course, you probably weren't playing him if you owned him. Stephon Diggs had a good game. Shakir didn't really do anything. He's kind of a guy where it was like, yeah, he might do something. He's not. I mean, James Cook was the dude once again. Now, Latavius Murray did play more snaps because he ran more routes, but Cook had 16 carries. Now, it wasn't as good as what we would have liked, but it was a very tough run defense as it was. So, I mean, they're not shying away from James Cook, and they're not doing anything with Leonard Fournette, which was the biggest concern for people is that he would do something. Baltimore and the Chargers. Really, for Baltimore and the Chargers, Brandon Staley needs to be fired. Brandon Staley needs to be fired. Just get him out. Get him out. Get him out. All right, let's go into some quick hits and misses. Let's go into some quick hits and misses real fast, okay? Where was I going to go? I am going to go right here. Hold on. They didn't put those in yet? That's weird. Give me a second. I got to find the updated numbers here because they're not where they typically are. Here they are. All right, let's head on over to running backs, half PPR. Kyren Williams finished as the number 1 running back on the week, and I had him ranked at number 10. Again, I had him ranked higher than anybody in the industry and 20 spots higher than the consensus. So I was on it with him this week. Bijan ended up scoring 25 points. He had that receiving touchdown. He also had the rushing touchdown, 91 yards. He finishes the RB3. I had him lower this week. Definitely could have been higher on a guy like Bijan. Definitely could have been higher on a guy like Jonathan Taylor. I was a little bit lower on them this week than what I would have liked to, but I thought the matchups were a little bit more difficult than what they ended up presenting. So good for those two guys. I still had them inside the top 24, so you were still starting both of those guys anyway. Mostert I had inside the top 10. Isaiah Pacheco I had inside the top 10. They were at 4 and 5. McCaffrey finished at 2. I had him at 1. Josh Jacobs only finished a couple of spots off where I had him. Derrick Henry finished a couple of spots off where I had him. Tony Pollard. I was a little bit lower on Tony Pollard this week as well. I was really worried that he wasn't going to get as many snaps as he did. That was a big thing. He got 6 receptions, so that helped out a little bit. So I was a little bit lower on Tony Pollard. Ramondre Stevenson. He finished inside the top 10. Chuba Hubbard I was off on. Nobody was playing Chuba Hubbard, though. Or shouldn't have been anyway. So if you did, congratulations to you. Honestly, like my biggest miss of the week was the guy that y'all hate on me for hating. It was Rachaad White. I had Rachaad White at 5. He finished at 18. So yeah, quite a few calls inside the top. I would say like the biggest misses were having Jonathan Taylor and who was it again? Tony Pollard. Jonathan Taylor and Bijan a little bit too low. Had him a start still. And then I would say probably having Rachaad White ranked way too high was also an issue as well. In terms of the tight ends, TJ Hockenson plays tonight, obviously. Travis Kelce finished inside the top 5. Freiermuth, my biggest miss was Freiermuth. Sam Laporta ended up having a good day. I had him at 5. He finished at 3. David Njoku and Trey McBride were 2 guys that I was still on this week that I was like, yep, let's go ahead and roll with these guys. Gerald Everett I did not have ranked, but I also when I did my rankings this week, I didn't know if he was going to play or not still, and that was unfortunately because we had to get stuff out so early this week. I didn't have a chance to get that information as early or as I did not hear. I forgot about that. I did not hear that there was like a fire at the Red Zone studios. I actually had Red Zone off when it happened, and people were like, "Oh, he's being evacuated." So I didn't get to see that live. It popped up on my screen and it was playing for some reason. So I was like, why is this playing? But David Njoku and, Trey McBride were 2 guys that I had in there. Cade Otton was a guy that I talked about a little bit. I had him at 18. He finished at 15. Isaiah Likely was a guy. I had him at 15. He finished at 18. So those were like decent hits. My biggest miss would have been Pat Freiermuth. And then like Tucker Kraft. No one was going to play him, or Drew Sample, or Adam Troutman. It wasn't a great week for tight ends this week. It was not a great week for tight ends this week. I don't know why we would get rid of Barkley. Hits and misses for Jake. Hits Zay Flowers, Michael Pittman, George Pickens, and Deontay Johnson both had him ranked outside the top 40 this week. Cooper Kupp, he had him ranked outside the top 30, and Brandon Cooks was a hit for him. Misses, Matthew Stafford, Josh Downs, Adam Thielen, Christian Watson, and Jacobi Meyers were those from him. So overall, a good week. In terms of underdog this week, we were 9 for 14, I think it was. 9 of 14 for the pick'ems that we talked about on Sunday. So that's good. Won a lot of money this weekend, which a lot of people in Headliner Nation did. Saw green all over Discord, which is good to see. And then, yeah, that's going to do it. So I've been live for just over an hour. I did not want to go that long, but I did. So we're going to be done now. Headliner Nation, again, I appreciate you all hanging out with me. For those of you that maybe have came in early and maybe had asked and I didn't see it, I did try to do this show earlier today. Unfortunately, my daughter had a medical emergency at school, went and took care of that. She is doing fine now, so if you were wondering what happened there or anything, that's the update. She's doing good. Appreciate all the well wishes and all of the comments that are on the videos and in Discord, wanting to check in on her and make sure that she was all right. So I really appreciate that. Didn't love getting that call and really didn't love it getting in the middle of a stream either. So appreciate you all sticking with me there and glad I was still able to get this show in today. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I need to go. I've got running backs to take care of. I got to talk about them and do stuff for them. I've got lots of things to do tonight. So Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. I appreciate y'all. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Later.
When the game on the line, you can't fold and you can't bend.